all of this, like design, whether you're designing your life or you're designing a chair, requires courage, because you're creating something that doesn't exist, right? Based on what you know today, you're imagining the future.
Welcome back to the Happiness and Progress podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I am an Emmy award-winning journalist, a mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. I am so excited to introduce you to today's guest. You are going to be hearing from Ayse Birsel. She is one of the world's leading industrial designers. She is one of Fast Company's most creative people in business, and Interior Design Magazine recognized her as the best of year product designer of 2020. You've probably held or sat on something she's designed for Miller Knoll, Target, or Toyota, among many others. Ayse is the author of the best-selling Design the Life You Love, a step-by-step guide to building a meaningful future, and she is recognized as the #1 coach for life design. It was such a joy to talk to her, and in this conversation, she gives us some insight into how a designer thinks and how we can use that to create the life we want, how we can deconstruct and then reconstruct our lives. She even walks me through a really cool exercise that you can use as well. And I know a lot of you question your purpose. We're going to talk about that and how all of this applies to you no matter what age you are. In fact, she's going to talk about how a long life is the key to innovation. That and so much more in this episode. So let's get to it. Ayse, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Danielle, thank you for having me.
I am so excited to talk to you because you have taken this idea of industrial design and applied it to our lives. When did you realize that you could use the same elements in industrial design for our life design?
I developed my design process and called it deconstruction, reconstruction, based on years of designing everything from toilet seats to potato peelers to office systems. But I always thought that our #1 design project is our life. Mm-hmm. And it was just something intuitive in my gut. I thought our life is just like a design project full of problems. And, design is a problem-solving discipline. And so once I had this process, I thought, if my life is a design project, can I apply design process to it? And so it started as an experiment. Mm-hmm. And it succeeded.
And were you using that deconstructing, reconstructing with our human life?
Yeah, I was.
Tell me about it.
First, my own life. I was my first experiment, and I was like, oh, this seems to work. When you deconstruct something, you see what it's made up of, and you take something complex and break it down to its more feasible parts and pieces. But as you do that, you also break the connections or links that we assume are between things. And when they're all separated, and this could be your life, it could be, any project that you can think of. It could be even your vacation. It could be your leadership style. Once you see those parts, then you start to think about, well, do I need all these? Is there anything missing? What could I connect differently? And you draw inspiration. So that's a big piece of thinking creatively, is also drawing inspiration. And you draw inspiration from your values. And that allows you to make choices, because one of the things about then putting it back together, reconstruction, is realizing you can't have everything. So you have to make choices. And from that, once you can make those choices, then you can express an idea.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm about to sit down and deconstruct my life, or one of the listeners wants to try this, what does that look like?
It's really a step-by-step process. And one of my friends told me it looks like, in Karate Kid, you have this wax on, wax off. Like that. You go step by step, wax on, wax off, and you don't quite know where it's going to take you until it all comes together, and boom, you're like, oh, it's so much simpler. I have a design. I can visualize this thing, because that's really what design is all about, right? It's problem solving so that you can have an idea that you're excited about. And once you have that excitement about an idea, you want to put it into action. And that's where I'm trying to get people to go. But I do it step by step, because all of this, like design, whether you're designing your life or you're designing a chair, requires courage, because you're creating something that doesn't exist, right? Based on what you know today, you're imagining the future. And so the step-by-step piece of it helps you not worry about it, but then I'm responsible for bringing it together.
What are some of those steps that people can take, that step-by-step process?
So the step-by-step process is, there's a step 0, which is a creative warm-up, which is really important. And a creative warm-up is like going to the gym and warming up your muscles, but it's just for your brain and your creativity. And that could be anything. It could be, taking a picture. It could be drawing something. It could be writing a little poem, playing a little piano. But that just signals your brain that you're entering the creative space. Then you deconstruct, and deconstruction is super simple. You break something into its parts and pieces. Our life is made up of, family and friends and work and purpose and travel, and you just go down the list and you break those into its pieces. And then there's the second step is point of view, which is, how can I think about these things differently? So one of the things I get people to do is to have them think about their heroes and say, so who's a hero that inspires you about your life, the way they live their life or the way they do their work? And there's a little reveal to that. You pick a hero and then list the qualities of that hero. Do you want to do it together? We could do it together.
Oh yeah, that sounds fun. Yeah, let's do it. Okay. I got a list of hero.
Yeah, just go with your gut feeling. Who's a hero that comes to your mind? And it could be someone you know or you know of.
Well, you know what? Barbara Walters just passed away this week, and I have been thinking a lot about her. So I'll go with Barbara Walters.
Oh, that's fabulous. So, okay. So what are the qualities of Barbara Walters?
She is inviting, tenacity, trailblazing, warm, trustworthy, honest,
warm, trustworthy. Perfect.
Do I need more? I can keep going.
No, this is lovely. You want to add one more?
Let's see. Confident.
Love it. So, Danielle, what you just did is you made a list of your values. So I'll read them back to you. Your values are being inviting, which I can attest to, tenacity, trailblazing, you're honest and warm, trustworthy, and confident. And
that makes me feel emotional. Yeah, I love that. Wow.
So that is really is my way of asking you, what are your values? And that's really a hard question. If I were to ask you, what are your values? You're like, maybe you would have mentioned one or two of these things. But it's so much easier when you think about it through your hero. And so that's the reveal, is realizing that what you notice in people you admire are actually things you value. And our values are the foundation of our design.
That's powerful.
And once you know your values, you can make choices. And so that brings us to the reconstruction. And I would say, like, if we were doing the whole process together, the third step is reconstruction. Now, based on these values, what are the ingredients of your life? The things you want to keep, the things you want to change, the things you want to avoid. That is really important, what you want to avoid, because if you can leave some things out, and this could be for some people, I don't know, for some people it could be like smoking and drinking, but for others it could be they want to leave out gossip or they want to leave
That was the
out.
first one I thought of. Gossip.
We must be mind melding, or worrying, I want to leave out fear, So, and when you become aware of those things, then you can be more intentional about, well, how can I go about that? And one of the tricks is thinking about your hero and thinking, how did they do it? And they're showing you a model that you can mimic. And so that's the other thing I ask people is, like, just model your hero.
Yeah.
And these are things that are organic, changing, right? They're, and you might have other heroes and you might have other values over time. I was listening to you and was thinking, oh, Danielle is a mom, a working mom, just like me. And when you become a mom, your values, evolve, right? Also paying attention to those things. So I'll stop.
That is so powerful. It's such a cool exercise. And I can see how it can get us onto the pathway of creating and designing our own life. What are as you've worked with people, what are some of the things that you've seen people kind of uncover and be able to change about their lives?
Oh, I love that you asked that. So two things come to my mind. One is about love. When people deconstruct their life, often they forget to put love in there. As I think we all need love. We can't do without it. It's our essence. So I ask people, have you put love in there? And if they say no, I'm like, no, you need to put that right there in there right now. But through our recent research with people who are older, one of the things that we realized is that as we get older, we also learn to love ourselves. So now there's a second step to my question is, when you put love, who do you put? And we often put other people, right? Family and friends and this and that, children. And I just remind people, put yourself in there. And the sooner you can do that, the better it is. You're going to eventually get there, but better if you can learn it in your 20s and 30s.
Why do you think that is, that it isn't until we get older, what you found in your research, that we start to love ourselves?
I think because we become more forgiving of ourselves and more compassionate with experience. I mean, it's truly proven. Cognitive science tells us that as we get older, we get wiser, and we have this thing called crystallized intelligence that comes from all our experiences. And it's a beautiful thing to behold because it allows you to see patterns and make decisions quickly. That's why our mentors are often older people, because they see patterns from their own experiences and can give you guidance. And so that's why I think one of the patterns we have is we realize things have a way of sorting themselves out, and we all fail, and then we get up and we continue. And that's really the lesson. And one of the older people that we worked with told us that she thinks, okay, I fell down, I scraped my knee, but I can get up and continue to walk. And that's that mentality, Yeah, I failed, but I'm still cool. Yeah.
Well, I can even see that with my toddlers. I have an 11-year-old now. He just turned 11 yesterday. But when he was 2 and he fell, it was the end of the world. Or if I cut his sandwich wrong, it was the end of the world. Whereas now he's 11, he's like, the sandwich is gonna be fine. I'm just gonna eat it. Or we learn with experience. So I love that, and I love that I've kind of seen that in just 11 years. So another really important part of this process is finding purpose. And I get a lot of questions about this because sometimes it's harder for people to find purpose. What would your advice be there, finding that?
Oh, it's such a good question. And I was, in anticipation of our conversation, I was thinking about that if, our purpose and happiness are connected, right? It's, having a sense of meaning in our life makes us happy. But the trick is often we define our purpose through how other people see us, and not necessarily how we see ourselves. So part of loving yourself is also being able to listen to yourself. So one of the things that we learned from our research is that there's this great study that was done with people who are dying and the things that they say. And one of their regrets, actually the number one regret is, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not what others expect of me. And this is one of the things that we also learned from older people, is that as you get older, you start to care less about what other people think and more about what you want. And for some of us, this happens in midlife. You know, we've done most of the things that's expected of us, right? You go to school and, you know, you make a living, you maybe have a partner, maybe you form a family, you know, whatever those things are.
You check off the boxes. Yeah.
You check out the box. And, you know, our life is actually designed so that we have those ready-made, what I call ready-made purpose, you know, school, job, family, tuck, tuck, tuck. I love how you say, check out the boxes. But then there comes a time, often in our 40s and 50s, when we realize, okay, now what? You know, and that's, I think, that's the time to think about your self-made purpose. And your self-made purpose is connected to your values.
So you're turning inward for this instead of maybe looking externally like we've done for decades and decades and decades. Is that right?
Absolutely. And, you know, the way life is structured, it also creates that kind of emptiness, whether it's intentional or not, because you'll notice as we get older, if you have kids, your kids take off. So now your kids cannot define your sense of purpose. And some of us retire or want to change jobs. And so work doesn't really create that. You're not necessarily at school. And so you have to start defining, okay, regardless of all the social structures, what's important to me? What gives me my sense of meaning?
I think this work that you're doing is so important because I think in that space and honestly, even younger, I think people can start to question, you know, I thought I would be farther along. I'm too old to do XYZ. I've not done enough. I don't have enough time, whatever the story is they write. How can, if someone has written that story for themselves, how can they back out of that and start recognizing that they can design their life right now?
You know, you're absolutely right. And I think COVID really accelerated this for us because it took away everything we know. And almost all of us had to kind of reinvent our life, our sense of meaning, how we live every day. And now the repercussions of that is still continuing. You know, I think a lot of us realize work is not everything. We have a life. And in that life, we have a lot of caregiving responsibilities, whether it's towards our kids or our parents or friends. And those are the things that give meaning. You know, self-created purpose or self-made purpose is looking for places where we can create meaning. And I talk about this in my book. The kinds of things that give us meaning is it's not only making money. You know, helping others give us a sense of meaning. Creating something, you know, starting a project gives us that. Fighting for something that we believe in. Learning something. These are all different ways that we can create meaning. And I think starting to pay attention to those things and then thinking about, well, how do I do that? That doesn't mean that, you know, you stop everything that you're doing. It's figuring out how to make time for those things within your day. And I would say it's creating habits.
Mm-hmm. I love how you, I had read one of your newsletters and I love how you took a practice of drawing every single morning. What did that do to what did that bring into your life?
Oh, this is so top of mind. I really, beginning of the year was hit with this fear of, I just finished my second book, Design the Long Life You Love. The year was coming to an end. Uh, you know, my one daughter is in college, the other is going to take off, and this feeling of, okay, what do I do now?
Mm-hmm.
It's palpable. So I wrote that newsletter in a way for myself, and then I shared it with everybody else. But it was saying, and it came from a poem that Rumi wrote. And I can't remember the exact words of the poem, but he talks about, and Rumi is the Persian poet from the 12th century. I'm Turkish, so he's very close to me. He lived in Turkey at the time. Anyways, he talks about waking up frightened and empty. And I was like, hold on one second. Rumi talks about love all the time. What does he mean? He woke up frightened and empty, and I immediately thought, okay, so this is normal. I bet everybody feels this way.
I know the exhale on that when you recognize even Rumi felt that way. Yes.
But then I was like, okay. And he actually says, before you go to your to your work, do something creative. And the way he says it is pick up, he plays music. And I thought, okay, I can't play music for the life of me, but I can draw. So it reminded me that my way of starting my day is taking my pen and thinking creatively.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, then I went on to suggest that for everyone. So before you start working or whatever you're doing, do something creative that's meaningful to you. And for you, Danielle, I don't know what that is. Maybe it's writing. For somebody else, for me, it's drawing. For somebody else, somebody just wrote to me and said, "Oh, thank you. I played the piano today." That's how I started my day.
I love that.
But that sense of creativity, I think, one, connects us with something bigger than ourselves. And for me, it helps me think, okay, I can be creative now and the rest of my day. And when we are creative, we can problem solve, and we're optimists rather than pessimists. So that's really the idea.
Mm-hmm. As you were talking about that, you mentioned this big identity shift that you are experiencing as one daughter's in college and the other is preparing to leave as well. Excuse me. What advice would you give to people, especially as they're doing this work of finding their purpose and designing their life, and also kind of grappling with that big life change of an identity shifting in that way?
Yeah. So the way I think about it is like drawing a roadmap. And often when we draw a map, we don't know all the pieces, parts and pieces. But what I find very helpful is getting our thoughts out of our minds and putting it on paper.
Mm-hmm.
And to do it not just by writing, but drawing and writing, so that we're using left and right brain. And so the best way I do this is, again, teaching them a step-by-step process of saying, do these 4 steps to deconstruct and reconstruct your life. And when you reconstruct, my goal is to get you to think about an original map for you. So going back to that idea of, you don't want to regret not living true to yourself. So in a way, designing your original life based on your values is all about thinking about your life creatively.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love that, because there's just so much possibility when you think about your life like that.
it really is. And I've been thinking about this. I always talk about, I teach people how to design their life. But you know how sometimes when you think and think, your ideas get simpler and simpler.
Mm-hmm.
I recently realized, actually, no, of course I teach people how to design their life, but that's the process. But really what I'm trying to give people are tools to become optimists.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're an optimist, you have hope, and you can, you see problems as opportunities. And that's really what I want to be able to do, is turn people, including myself, from this pessimist mode of, I have all these challenges, I have all these problems, to here are these tools that you can use to every day transform yourself into an optimist. And that optimism will give you the courage and the energy to think about your life and move forward with new ideas. And yeah.
That is so powerful. I always call myself, I used to call myself a recovering pessimist.
There we go. Exactly.
Because it's very, very easy.
That.
I think our brains do lean to the negative and the pessimism as a way to keep ourselves alive, back when we were cavemen. And it is so everything that you described in optimism, seeing the possibilities and seeing solutions, that changes your life so much when you are able to add that into your life.
Absolutely. And one thing that jumps to my mind is, like, one of the keys to optimism. I mean, everything we've talked about, right? Loving yourself is part of it, finding meaning, self-made meaning. Another piece that I just want to mention is kind of like what you and I are doing, which is we're collaborating. Yes, you're doing a podcast, but we're really learning from each other, and then you're sharing that with your audience. And so collaboration is a huge part of it, of designing your life, because one of the things that you learn as a designer is you can't do anything without other people helping you. And in my context, that's engineers and marketing people, researchers. But then when you bring that to your life, our life is the same way, and we all need help. But most of us, we don't like asking for help because it feels like it's a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the tricks I figured out is, like, well, don't ask people for help, but ask them for collaboration. Just ask, could we collaborate? And then pick their brains. And then in doing that, you're giving them permission to ask you for help. And then it becomes this reciprocal thing. To me, that changes everything. So when I'm stuck, I just, call up one of my friends, and I don't tell them I need help. And I just kind of mentally set it in, like, let's collaborate.
Yeah. That is, I love that advice. And I was actually just thinking that as we were talking, this is so cool that I get to learn from you here in this conversation and share this with people listening as well. You say that long life is behind innovation. Can you walk me through that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. I'm so excited about long life. So the idea of long life comes from this year-long research we did with people who are 65 to 90 across the United States. And the lessons I learned from that were so impactful that I decided to write a book about it. And the reason that long life is an opportunity for innovation is because it didn't exist before. When we think of our grandparents, and for some people, our parents, in the 50s, people lived to their 60s, maybe 65, 70. And that's why people retired, and then they just, like, hung in there. But now, life expectancy is between 74 and 80, 85. And for our kids, chances are it's going to be much, much longer. And so there is this 20 to 30 extra years, which is the gift of time. And I'm like, that's mind-boggling. We now have an era that didn't exist before. And so when you look at life, from 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and then suddenly, hold on one second, 60 to 80 is a reality. So then the question becomes, what are you going to do with that time?
I got goosebumps when you said we have a new era. That is so cool.
It is so cool. And it is so cool for us as individuals, it's also an amazing opportunity for entrepreneurs and for companies to think about, so what are the services, products, structures for this time?
Mm-hmm. I was just reading a newspaper article this last week about a woman in my area. I think she was 91 or 92, and she just published her second book, and it's a series, and she has an idea for 5 books. So, I loved that. And I was like, I need to get her on my podcast. I haven't found her yet, but she's coming. But I love that, because I think it rewrites the story that we've told ourselves for a long time as humans. And it probably goes back to, those days when life expectancy was a lot shorter.
Yes. And, what's interesting is, like, we were talking about me, I'm in my 50s, my kids are taking off, and suddenly they're starting their life, they're in their 20s. And I feel like I'm starting my life. I'm not in my 20s, I'm in my 50s, but, the kids are flying the nest, and I might have another 20 years. And I could use that time to start something new. I could use that time to learn something. I could write, a third book. But that mentally changes how you think. That long view changes everything. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing that we realized through our research is actually 20-year-olds and 60-year-olds are more similar than different. Amazing. And I'm just going to put it in a nutshell. Danielle, for your listeners, it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
That is so funny.
I know.
I was thinking it was mom jeans.
And you're not far off. So
that is so cool. I love that. Thank you so much for your time today. Before I let you go, I want to ask you the last question I ask everyone, which is, what is your number one tip to finding more joy in the good, the bad, and the in-between?
Ooh, I love that. I think, what a great question. I think it's really giving ourselves permission to design our original life, that life true to ourselves. And it might not be 100%, because we all have challenges and responsibilities, but maybe, making that top of mind so that we strive to get closer to that. Mm-hmm. And design an original life that looks like you, that feels like you.
Mm-hmm. And it starts with that permission. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I loved this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as well and took something away. I hope you try that exercise with your hero, because that took my breath away a little bit. So all of the information from Ayse and how you can be in touch with her, how you can grab her book, it's all in show notes. And I will see you for the next episode. Thank you for being here on Happiness in Progress.